What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and this is the Rebalanced podcast. So this is the first podcast with the new name, and I'm after rebranding it from the Mobility Experiment to the Rebalanced podcast. And the reason being is that I feel with the new name, it gives me a lot more opportunity to take on people inside of, let's say, health and fitness and wellness, but also outside as well. And I'm able to, hopefully, with this new platform now, take on more people, look at how to get more balance in your life, how to improve your health, how to improve your physical and mental health, as well as your spiritual health, as well as everything else in between. I want to bring on a lot of thought-provoking guests and people who can give different opinions, outside the box opinions, because I think sometimes we often just get stuck with the same opinions over and over again, and it's nice to see it from all angles. I often say if you can't argue the other person's point of view, really it's very difficult for you to have a strong opinion on something. Well, you can have a strong opinion, but it's very biased, and you know it's biased. But if you're able to argue the other person's opinion, then a lot of the time you will be in a better position. You'll be more well-rounded, I guess, and you'd be less biased. And with anything, I think it's better to be less biased in ways. Well, at least know your biases. Obviously, there's no problem to be biased. You're obviously going to be biased for certain things, but once you know your biases, then you can at least work on them, and you can have a better connection with somebody because you know yourself that bit better. So, yep, that's, I suppose, everything that I want to cover on that specific topic. But today's episode is going to be about New Year and the New Year and your New Year resolutions. I know I'm only messing. It's not going to be about New Year's resolutions, but it will give you a different perspective onto how to approach new things that you start in the new year. And I stumbled upon it after I was looking for reflections on the year before, as well as how to start a new year and how other cultures may have done it, and how other, I guess, traditions are. And I stumbled upon this very interesting one called Hatsu Geiko. Now, I am probably butchering that, and I even went onto Google to try and see if I could get a translation of it. But the basic premise of Hatsu Geiko is that it's the first performance of a chosen art in the new year. Now, it's a Japanese practice that's been associated with the samurai and been associated with martial arts for centuries. And once I stumbled upon this, I actually started to notice it in lots of other things as well. And I started to notice more people posting about it. But I think it's funny, obviously, that serendipity and how it happens, but maybe you're just more aware to it, and maybe you're always seeing it, but now I'm seeing it more. But in this case, Hatsu Geiko is basically how you approach your first performance of something. Now, it could be a training session, it could be a competition, or it could be looking at a skill or an art. But it's really the approach to it that makes a difference. And when it's usually practiced within the first few weeks of the new year, it's seen as a time to reset, refocus, and then set your intentions for the year ahead. So if it is a martial art that you're practicing, it may be you may have intentions of working on the fundamentals, having certain moves that you want to go over. If it is in football or hurling, same thing. It could be about cooperation, building relationships with your teammates. It could be practicing the basics again, or it could be trying out a new skill. But it really comes down to the intention and the focus that you set on the very first session, and how that will dictate what happens for the rest of the year. So when I was looking into it and I was doing research on it, it even went on to speak about how some practitioners use it as an opportunity to perform like purification rituals, or even pay respects to their grandmasters and their ancestors. And I think it is a great time of the year to refocus and to really look at the year ahead and start to develop the habits and the skills, start to implement them straight away at the start of the year, so that it carries on session by session for the rest of the year. So in its essence, it's a celebration of renewal, rededication, and spirit. And when I was doing a lot of research on it, or when I was looking into it more, it's actually hard to find a lot on it. There's a couple of places that would talk about it in particular, but a lot of the time it's practitioners talking about how they practice it in their own discipline, whether that be calligraphy, whether it be judo or jiu-jitsu. That's how I stumbled on it, obviously, is jiu-jitsu. Or if it was anything else, like even down to the art of tea making. Now, I'm after butchering that because it's a tea ceremony, not tea making. But even down to that art, that everything that you do has to have meaning, and everything that you do has to have the utmost attention to detail, fluidity, and then also, and a great quote that I picked out was, it demonstrates a relaxed and flowing performance, which I think is a really good way of looking at it. I think it's a very interesting perspective on it. And the Asians, or the Asian culture, always have that level of, especially when you look at Chinese and Japanese culture, there's always that element of finesse in it and making everything, as they say, move like water. So really what it is you're taking the first performance of the year very seriously. You're making it can be in anything at all. And it doesn't just have to be training. It can be in other aspects of your life also, whether it's getting back to work, meeting people at work, or meeting people in a different environment. If you're trying to take up a new skill, maybe it's trying to build relationships with your family and friends. Maybe you haven't met a friend in a while, and you're going to set the intention that on the day that you meet them first, you have a very clear intention of how you want to build and go forward with that relationship. The Japanese have described it as a time that you define who one is, if one has mastered his art, or where one is on the road to mastery. This is what Hatsu Geiko is. And finding out where you are along that journey is really, really important. But to celebrate the new year, it's all about the first, and then only the first attempt that counts. And the word attempt, I think, was when I was reading through it, that was one that stuck out to me, because you are obviously looking for a level of perfection. Obviously, perfection is unattainable in a lot of things, but you are looking for that level of perfection. But it's more of the attempt and the intention that you put into it, the attention to detail, looking for a flow, looking for a comfort, looking for a relaxation. That's the part of it that really makes a difference. And if you're able to bring that focus to one session, when you start to get a feeling for what that's like, then you can start to bring it to the sessions ahead of you. And I think that's why, for me, it really stood out. It was like you're setting the intention, but you're also setting the foundation for what you're going to build upon in the next couple of weeks after that. The other thing is that there's no warm-up session and there's no practice sessions before the first one. You have to just get straight into it. You prepare. Obviously, you prepare yourself physically, mentally, but there's no session that you can do that's going to warm up to it. And I spotted there was a video on YouTube of one particular, is it Kendokan? Is that what it's called? Maybe I'm wrong, where they have the swords. And there was another one, and it was basically like Taekwondo, but obviously Taekwondo is Korean, so it was a Japanese version of that. And they had to practice 1,000 kicks on that day. If you weren't able to get to 1,000 kicks because of, let's say, a certain injury or illness, then you had to practice something else, like 1,000 blocks. But you had the intention that whatever you were doing, you were going to do it perfectly 1,000 times, which I think comes back to that Bruce Lee quote, really, doesn't it? Of not to fear the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time, but the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times. And I think that idea of attention, fluidity, relaxation, and flow really comes through if that is the case, you're not just banging through your kicks, or you're not just banging through your training session to try train as hard as possible. You're actually looking to get something out of each session, and you have a really clear intention of what you're trying to do. The fact that you don't get any practice sessions or warm-up sessions before your Hatsu Geiko session, there's going to be someone listening to this who speaks Japanese who's going to message me and say, you butchered that word every single time you said it. And I'm sorry, but I looked it up on Google and that's all I can get. All right. So you have to bear with me on that one. It sounds all right for an Irish guy saying it, I think. But anyway, to get back to it, there's an element of it as well in the preparation for it that you need to practice mindfulness, because as much as the physical side of things needs to come into play, and the physical art and the expression of the physical art, there's definitely a side of it that is mental as well. And with the mental aspect of it, there's a huge element of mindfulness involved in it, obviously. So what some practitioners described it as is that when you breathe in, you're breathing in inspiration. And now I'm not just talking about inspiration for like expiration, inspiration. I'm talking about inspiration for your life. And when you breathe out, you're breathing out performance. So breathe in, inspiration, and breathe out, performance. The other one was breathe in to relax, breathe out to manifest the spirit, which I thought was another interesting way of looking at it. But the idea of meditation before it is huge, because it's supposed to put people into this flow state, this state of control that otherwise they may not be as available to them. So practicing meditation and deep breathing before can help to calm the mind and help prepare you for that training side of things. The other side of the mental preparation was setting clear goals and intentions. And I've said this throughout the podcast, but this was a huge thing that kept on coming up. It was about the goals, and more importantly, it was about the intention, because everyone knows you're not going to get something right 100% of the time. But if you have the intention to do it with serious attention, serious focus, and then as well as moving like fluid or moving like water, then after a while that will start to develop itself. So setting the intention of what you're trying to do was really, really important, and it kept on coming up in everything that I found. So what are some of the benefits of using this practice, or what are some of the benefits that the practitioners discuss? Well, a lot of the time when they're looking at Hatsu Geiko, it's, as I said, it's a time to focus, but it's a time to focus on personal growth and improvement. Knowing where you're trying to get to, having a clear direction on what you're working on or what you're trying to do. And as I said, it helps to set that intention. It can be a time to establish a new goal that you may previously have thought about, but never thought about how to get there. So it is starting the new year fresh, really. And with that, obviously, you'll have the mental side of things, that you're going to be a lot more engaged in what you're doing. But the physical side of things, then, that you're going to get the benefits of the work that you put in. And you're not just going to get the benefits from one session, obviously. But the fact that you're building that foundation from the ground up at the start of the year on, in 5, 6, 7 months' time, that's when you start to see those benefits, as we know. And even maybe earlier if you're on the verge of that kind of breakthrough. Because a lot of the time we are on the verge of a breakthrough in a new sport or a new art, and all we need is a new focus or a kind of a different perspective on it to get the breakthrough. So with this side of things, it can give you that stage to perform on. So when would you implement it? Really, when I was looking it up, a lot of it was focused around martial arts or certain arts like calligraphy or tea ceremonies. They were the kind of basic, they were the ones that I had seen a lot. But for you, if you're listening to this, maybe you play GAA, or maybe you're a runner, maybe you play soccer or football, whichever one you want to go for. If that's the case, it's focusing on in the first couple of weeks of the year that you really focus on intention for every session. It gives you that opportunity to review and practice basic techniques and maybe just fall back on the fundamentals, the things that later on in the year you jump forward to too much. So it could be the fundamentals for most things, could be your physical and mental preparation, the breathing and the mindfulness that you use, or maybe your diet or hydration. Whatever it is, whatever your fundamentals are for you, your sport, or your lifestyle, this is a great time within the first couple of weeks of the year to focus on having a clear direction on where you're trying to get to, as well as reviewing them and going over them again. If you're involved in a team sport, another huge element to this was actually bonding with your fellow practitioners and working on starting afresh and building a new community. So if you're getting back to work and maybe you ended the year in the work environment that you weren't exactly in the right frame of mind, maybe things were edgy, it could be a good time to set the new foundation there, set the principle that you're going to work on building better relationships and building a better community in that environment. So that is really all I'm going to talk about today on it, because it's actually interesting. As much of a, let's say, really, like for me anyway, very, very interesting, very eye-opening topic, there's not that much research on it. And I was looking into it a good bit for a couple of days, and I couldn't really figure out, I couldn't find a load on it. So I said myself, I'm going to just start to practice that. So in everything that I do, I suppose that's probably the best way to do it for now. Now, I know when this is going to come out, it's going to be a week into the new year, but it does say it's in the first few weeks of the new year. And just remember that Hatsu Geiko is a time that you reset, refocus, and set intentions for the year ahead, as well as not just setting them in, let's say, in your head and kind of have an idea and writing them down, as well as that actually putting them into practice. And how do you put them into practice? You don't wait for the second and third practice. You just start to implement it straight away. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. And I really, really appreciate you listening to the podcast. I am looking forward now to building the podcast over the next couple of years. Something that I'm going to focus on long term. And if anyone has any suggestions, or if anyone has any ideas, I would love to hear them. Really, I do, because a lot of people get onto me, give me little suggestions here and there, and ideas for guests, and I always try to work on them straight away. So if you do, just write to me on Instagram, send me an email at mobilitytutor@gmail.com, or Instagram is probably the best place. Facebook you could, but I'm poor for checking Facebook, or TikTok. But yeah, that is everything for me today. I hope you all are having a good start to your new year. I hope that everyone out there has set intentions or has set an idea for what they want to achieve this year, has set some goals. And as well as I hope everyone had a good Christmas. So, if you haven't already, last thing I will say, or last two things I'll say is, will you please subscribe, like, and follow this on Spotify, YouTube, or iTunes, whatever you listen on. I uploaded my first video podcast with Owen Dobbin last week, so check that out. It was great to catch up with him. It was really, really good too. It's also on, if you want to listen to it, it's also on Spotify, it's also on iTunes, but you can watch the video podcast. We have it set, it's in the pub downstairs in my home house. We lit a little fire and we talk through everything about identity evolution, ego, masculinity, risk taking, and all that. So definitely check that episode out. And yeah, that's all from me today, guys and girls. I will chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.